Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago. Joining us on set, we have Juanita Headley. She is talking about human trafficking. She's a human trafficking abolitionist. And Dr. Alicia Martin, the founder of, I hope I get the pronunciation, CODA? Code. So it's human trafficking for sexual exploitation. Human trafficking in the Caribbean region is sort of like an urban myth. And while Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica has officially established counter-trafficking units within their legislative agenda and within their national security apparatus, they're still lacking in terms of statistical data, analysis, understanding the root causes, and whether or not it does exist. Everyone knows it's there, but no one really knows how, to what extent, and if it is happening. Well, these two, and interestingly enough, we're talking about all of this happening in the month that we've dedicated to raising awareness on the issue of human trafficking. And while we know that sexual exploitation, I think about 70% of cases of human trafficking are linked to sexual exploitation, there are other types of reasons behind human trafficking as well. But the experts are on set with us this morning, and also changingcases.org. You can get more information on this at the website. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Now, let me start with you, a human trafficking abolitionist. That's an interesting title. What exactly is a human trafficking abolitionist? How did you first get involved in this type of work?
So I've had the opportunity to volunteer in the Philippines, and it really stole my heart. There's so much sexual exploitation there. And I'm a born-again Christian, and I just felt God was really calling me and leading me to make a difference and to bring change into the lives of the victims.
Now, you know, when you spoke about the lives of victims, was there one particular case that you interacted with that thought, I didn't understand the extent of the problem?
I think there's just so many cases, it becomes overwhelming, and it can be very, very difficult to sort of see the hope at the end, the light at the end of the tunnel. But for me, I feel that I can make a difference one child at a time, and so I don't become bogged down by the information, but just focus on the solution and how we can bring change.
Dr. Martin, you founded this organization. Let's talk about the role of the organization. How did the organization then identify with this cause?
Okay, so in my research, I dealt with street children in Jamaica. And out of that, I decided to form this organization, which really seeks to empower and educate vulnerable populations, particularly children, but all vulnerable populations. So a project like this is one such attempt to do that, where we are taking Juanita to different schools, community groups, churches, religious organizations, all stakeholders, to really raise awareness and empower individuals within our country. Because like you said, we know it's happening, but it still appears to be a myth.
Is it happening? Do we have actual evidence to suggest that there is human trafficking and it is a problem in our country?
Yeah, it is happening, but there's no statistics, there's no information. And so I have a group on Facebook where we get information about trafficking around the world, and we get articles in Trinidad and Tobago, but we have no information about trafficking happening here.
I looked at some research over the last few weeks, and I noted that we had 22 cases last year, but we didn't have any prosecutions, really. Also, 200 persons were missing in 2016. So we can't make official linkages, and we don't have actual prosecutions, but we know that certain things are happening unlawfully within this area. And like you said, it's not just sexual exploitation, it's domestic servitude, and it's also forced labor.
The 22 cases that you talk about, they are directly linked to human trafficking. We can
Directly.
And
for sexual exploitation.
What is the issue with persecution and prosecution, if we know that these 22 cases are linked to it?
One of the biggest things is most victims don't identify as being a victim. So that's the first thing. We have Stockholm Syndrome. They fall in love with their captor quite often. It's a very deep-rooted situation and issue because it's a mental thing. Mind games, we have boyfriend pimp and things. And so most individuals who are trafficked don't even realize they are, whether that's labor or sex trafficking. So that's the biggest issue. And when it comes to prosecution, they're not willing to speak out against their captor, their rescuer, their boyfriend.
And of the 22 cases, are we talking all women? Because, you know, a lot of times people think when they look at sexual exploitation, we think of women. We normally think of young women who it's a stereotypical, glamorized Hollywood, and I don't want to put it in that way, that it's a particular type of woman.
Interestingly, there were a few adult males, and there was one child, male.
And in terms of following the trail, because a lot of times you see with ICE in particular, where they make these raids and you find these containers of women, what is the most common way that we find these women, and how are they taken?
So often what the man does is he will create a relationship with this woman, and so he will wine her and dine her. We call this grooming. And so he'll groom this woman over a period of months or weeks or days, depending how patient he is. And then once she falls in love with him, then he has her in his grasp. And he often says, if you love me, have sex with my friends, or to pay the bills, I need you to have sex for money. Or other times, because they're impatient, they will just use brute force, rape these women, and then turn them out.
I think in our context, it's a bit different because we have a lot of illegal migrants and they are especially vulnerable. So you would see that we have persons from Venezuela, Colombia, Guyana, Dominican Republic, India, Nepal. So these persons who are coming into our country who don't have legal status, they are actually targeted. And we would find that, well, we don't have proof, but they may exist in bars, masters, brothels, that kind of thing.
You know, and people look at that, looking at the migrant issue. What I saw that I think the BBC had an investigation recently where they looked at women coming out of the African continent and they were given promises of better lives. Is it similar?
Yeah, because it's not always about poverty. Sometimes an individual simply has a need that's love. And so the guy offers to love them, offers to give them stability that they maybe don't have. And quite a lot of runaways in the United States are trafficked within the first 24 hours because the guy comes and rescues them.
What is the difficulty? You talk about the fact that there's Stockholm Syndrome and there are other issues affecting persecution, but the investigation itself, Dr. Martin, why is it so difficult for our local authorities? There is a counter-trafficking unit, but why is it so difficult for them to say, we are, because you know the international rings, you look at the online sites and you can identify which particular nefarious group is linked to what human trafficking ring? Why is it so difficult for our authorities to make a dent in this?
Honestly, this issue has been traditionally linked to corruption. And the counter-trafficking unit has been engaging in training for our officials, either our officials in customs to identify human trafficking, as well as sensitizing our police officers as well. And that's the most that they can do from that angle.
Women you talk about are wined and dined. Is there an instant of outright kidnapping, and you see that as well in the Caribbean countries?
The kidnapping does happen, but sometimes we have smuggling cases where a person comes over what we would call willingly, and then they are kidnapped into trafficking. So it starts as smuggling, becomes trafficking, or we have women who are just picked up off the street and then put into prostitution. So that does happen. There's the kidnapping, there's the smuggling that can go into kidnapping, or simply forming a relationship, or in South America, marrying a woman and then turning her out into prostitution.
And following on what she just said, like she said before, it's not just about poverty. So you have a wide demographic that is vulnerable to this type of crime, and social media has a role to play as well, because we are giving a lot of information, and perpetrators and predators can actually target us because of that.
And that would have been my other set of questions. How do women protect themselves? Because a lot of times they can go looking for a job. You go looking, I mean, if I see an application, I go and apply online for something, you are then given an opportunity. How do you, one, discern the information and protect yourself?
I would say if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And in relation to foreigners who are going overseas from the Philippines, a lot of times they go over for a job as a nanny, or from Russia go over for a job as an au pair, and then they end up being exploited, same as with China. So if it looks too good to be true, but when it comes to domestic, it's very difficult to discern. We have women who apply for jobs in modeling, and then they are in pornography, which they didn't sign up for. And then their documents are taken, their ID is taken, and then they're imprisoned in a home. These kind of things happen where they have to provide services to the men as well as perform pornography.
How do we help these women? How do we break the cycle? Even if, and I'm not just talking about sexual exploitation, but domestic servitude as well. Where do they find help from, and how do we even, if you make a report, where do you go to?
Well, I know that the counter-trafficking unit last year in particular, they engaged in a lot of talks and public awareness through the film that they marketed, trafficking, and they went into schools, they did camps. That is one avenue. Having someone like Juanita is another avenue as well, and that's why we are here to ask people to contact us to increase the bookings that she has so that she can actually interact with a lot more groups. So I think that right now the counter-trafficking unit, they are the most present organization that we have that you can go to. They also have a hotline. And people like Juanita, we tap into her organization online, and we try to make the best use of her while she's here.
Juanita, you know, to the women out there who are victims of human trafficking, do they ever come back to a sense of normalcy after?
It depends. You have stories where women receive the therapy, the counseling, the prayer, the healing, and they're restored. And there are those who get the help, but unfortunately still have the demons. And there's a woman who set up an organization, Survivors, Inc. She was formerly trafficked, and unfortunately she died of an overdose, I believe maybe April of this year. Because the demons, it's very hard to forget about the memories, forget about the number of men, customers that you have. And in my opinion, it's paid rape. And how do you ever get past paid rape with thousands of men every single day?
Do the women have the will to escape? Because I know I read of particular cases where the passports were taken away with the promise of jobs, particularly overseas jobs. And when they get there, they are given their passports and then they're put in this sort of payback period, which they're forever in debt. They will never be able. And a lot of times, women are the ones who are controlling these rings when they're there.
Yeah, it's bonded labor, and it's very hard for these women to get out because once your ID is taken, and if you're an illegal immigrant, then there's the fear of the authorities, being deported, taken back home, being re-trafficked. We have cases of children who are trafficked to a country for sex, sent home and re-trafficked by their family members over and over again, so not enough is being done.
What are you hoping to do? What is your mission in relation to raising awareness on human trafficking?
So for me, my dream is really to educate people around the world, empower them to act so we can protect each other, see an end to sexual exploitation. And one day I'd love to open an orphanage in the Philippines or shelter homes to provide a safe house, a safe haven for the most vulnerable, and to give them that help, that healing, that wholeness so they can go into a more productive life.
You know, we talk about human trafficking. You keep making reference to the Philippines, and I know, oh God, I can't remember the name, but she was recognized by CNN as one of the CNN heroes, and looking at the fact that in these Asian countries, there's so much research, and you're able to do that. Why is it not as prevalent in the Caribbean region and other developing countries?
Possibly in the Caribbean because people turn a blind eye. It's a taboo subject. Nobody wants to talk about it. And I know on good authority we have individuals here who are teenage and adults who are being sexually abused at their church, in their schools, by their siblings. There's a lot of incest and people turn a blind eye. I know of a person who's abused at a church right here in Trinidad. The family members know and have done nothing. And this person, the pastor, is still in leadership in his church.
And in the end, when you talk about education, how do we educate? You talk about the school scores. What are the other things that you intend to do or can do?
So for me personally, I believe educating, which means telling boys, do not sell your daughter, do not sell your sister. Telling girls, do not sell your body. And also parents, and educating in the sense that lives are valuable, that you shouldn't see your child or a relative or whoever as a commodity, as disposable, someone to make money off. We're all human beings. We all have a purpose on earth. And it's to discover that purpose and to live it out, but not to exploit others so that you can get richer, so that you can have a big car, a big house, at the expense of someone's life.
You know, I know that it is not as prevalent with men and with young boys. You keep referring to young girls, and I think a lot of times when people think human trafficking, they think prostitution, so they think women.
Yes.
What is the average age that we're talking about?
Typically, the girl that gets into prostitution between the age of 12 to 13, but we have girls who were sold for sex in Cambodia and the Philippines, and boys sold for sex, and we're talking about 7 years old. We have children of 2 years old in shelters who were sexually abused, trafficked by their parents.
Persecution of those internationally, how difficult is it to break a human trafficking ring? And in terms of persecution, what is the fate of these persons in these cases?
When you say the faith, how do you mean?
In terms of the consequences, do we see a lot of convictions happening?
In the Philippines, there's so much corruption that on occasion we have judges who are murdered, we have lawyers who are murdered, their life is at stake for bringing these cases forward. We have the case of Peter Scully, who's currently in jail. He committed a lot of terrible sexual offenses against children, but he has air-conditioned special meals, and women come over and perform sexual acts for him in the jail. So the prison system is not working.
But in terms of boys, because of transnational crime, we also have boys being vulnerable, and they are being used to sell guns or drugs. So we can't, you know, omit them from the discussion either.
Your closing comments, what do you want to say to Trinidad and Tobago about the issue of human trafficking?
I would like to say that we are vulnerable. Sometimes we fail to, well, we turn a blind eye to these things, and sometimes I may not think that I'm vulnerable, but I might be as well, so I need to be aware and improve my safety and the methods that I use to protect myself and my family. I want to talk about Juanita in particular. She has an event at Movie Town on the 29th, and I want you to talk about that. And I want to thank some persons like Jean-Claude Corner from the 2 Cents movement. They, through their Artist in Residence program, they are helping Juanita with accommodation. Pastor Bobby Boudram, he's also helping Juanita. Mr. Raymond O'Keel from Youth in Focus, he's also assisting. And I want to thank these persons. She is self-funded, so anyone who has donations to contribute to her transportation or any aspect of her trip, it is welcomed.
What are you doing on the 29th in Movie Town?
So Movie Town, I'll be hosting and screening the film Sold. It's an American film shot in India. It's about a child being trafficked, in other words, child rape. I've screened it 16 times around the world in 4 countries. It's completely free of charge. People can contact me via changingcases.org and I can get them tickets. They're completely free because my desire is to educate people without a price tag. I never charge for any of my screenings. I want people to know about the issue and to protect the people around them.
So definitely be part of the event, and you can check out the website. You know, it's about time that we start addressing this issue frontally, because somehow it's become this urban legend that no one seems to really understand the extent of it and not the fact that it's happening. We're going to go to the newscast. When we come back, we'll have more for you.